Hello everyone, thank you for joining me again and welcome to any new viewers. This is To The Point English with Ben. I'm Ben, and in this video you're going to learn 10 advanced English idioms that you can use in your essays. And in fact you can use them in other writing compositions too, and in your speaking. So these are really versatile idioms. Now, I decided to make this video because I know this can be quite confusing for English learners, because many English teachers and books and websites explicitly say that you must not use idioms in your essays. And that's not quite true, because much like phrasal verbs, as long as you don't overuse idioms, it's okay to use them when they're appropriate according to the register. So you must always keep the register in mind. And when I speak about the register, I'm referring to the level of formality. And an essay should always have a neutral to formal register. But it's very difficult for an English learner to know which idioms are appropriate for an essay and which are not. So that's why I wanted to share these 10 idioms which you can use in your essays. And we're starting with to go the extra mile. To go the extra mile. And this means to make a special effort, or to do more than is required or expected of you. So let's look at an example. In a competitive job market, candidates who go the extra mile by acquiring additional certifications really stand out. So they make that extra effort, they do more than is perhaps required or expected, they really stand out. So maybe all the other candidates just do the minimum, they just do what is expected, nothing special. So it's really worth going the extra mile in this case. And the next idiom is to come full circle, to come full circle. And this means to return to the original point, situation or state after some change. So you can think of a circle, you have the starting point and then you go all the way around with lots of different changes and perhaps opinions and debates. But then you come back to the original point in the end after some time. So let's look at an example. The debate over the future of the health service has come full circle as many politicians promote policies from decades ago. Okay, so politicians are now promoting the same policies that were being promoted many decades ago. So you think of the starting point was decades ago, and there have been maybe lots of different ideas and opinions and changes, but in the end we've come full circle and we've returned to the original starting point, and the politicians are promoting the same policies. By the way, all of the examples I'm giving in this video are with the Cambridge English exams in mind, because I know a lot of you are preparing for those exams. So the topics of the examples are some of the most common topics that come up in those exams, and perhaps in other exams like the IELTS. But let's move on to idiom number 3 now, which is the tip of the iceberg. The tip of the iceberg. You may be familiar with this idiom, and perhaps you have a similar idiom in your own language. But at the tip of the iceberg, when it's used metaphorically, of course, means a small part or a small aspect of a much bigger issue. So let's look at the example. While the data on climate change shows alarming trends, it's believed that we've only seen the tip of the iceberg. We're saying here, right, we've got all this data and it's alarming, but it's even more alarming that that's just the small part of it. There's a lot more sort of under the water that you can't see. You imagine an iceberg in the sea, you can just see the little tip at the top, but there's a lot more underneath. By the way, you may have noticed that in this sentence I've used the singular form of the verb, shows, although the noun it's agreeing with is technically plural, data. You have one datum and many data. But in British English in particular, it's more common to use the singular form of the verb, although the noun is technically plural. I actually have a module in my grammar course, my online grammar course, where I explain in detail the different aspects of subject-verb agreement, because sometimes it can be quite confusing. I'll put a link to that course in the video description. And number 4 is the bottom line. The bottom line, and this refers to the most important or fundamental issue or aspect of something. It's actually from finance originally. When we talk about the bottom line in finance or economics, we're talking about the final number on a balance sheet. So that's the most important number. But we use it in a more general sense, a more metaphorical or figurative sense in most cases nowadays. So the example is, various factors influence the success of the education system. but the bottom line is that a lack of investment will affect future advancements. Okay, moving on to number 5 now, and that's the big picture. The big picture. So we use this idiom when we want to refer to seeing the whole perspective of something, sort of seeing the big picture, not just one little part of an issue or of a topic. You know, sometimes we spend too much time focusing on the little details when it's sometimes necessary to stand back and see the big picture. So let's look at the example. Although AI offers many benefits, the bigger picture reveals potential issues involving privacy, job displacement, and social inequality. So this is a topic which is becoming more and more common in the Cambridge English exams. AI, it's a very hot topic in the world at the moment in general. So it's possible that you'll get a question on AI, artificial intelligence, in your exam. Okay, moving on to number 6 now. To shed light on something. And this means to provide an explanation or information to make something easier to understand. But really it just means to illuminate, really, in a figurative sense. Again, of course, not literally shedding light or illuminating, but making something clearer and easier to understand. So the example: a recent study sheds light on the relationship between diet and mental health. Okay, so this topic is quite confusing and complicated, so it's difficult to understand, but this study provides an explanation, provides more information, so it's easier to understand, and you can really get an idea of what the topic is all about. And number 7 is to read between the lines. Now this means to understand something that is not explicitly stated. So it's to get an idea of what the writer or the speaker really means, although they don't really say it themselves. So this could be, more literal with written text where you have lines and you're kind of reading the gaps where there is no text. You're trying to get an idea of what the author is really trying to say. Or it could be just related to spoken English. Although you're not literally reading anything, you're trying to decipher or infer what the speaker really means. So let's look at the example. The comments in the questionnaire appear to be positive, but reading between the lines, it's clear that there is some level of dissatisfaction. And number 8 is to walk a fine line. To walk a fine line. And this means to maintain a balance between two contrasting ideas or factors. So you can probably imagine the origin, a fine line, like a tightrope walker or something, when you're balancing and you're trying not to go one way or the other. You're just trying to stay in the middle. So let's look at the example. Parents walk a fine line between giving their children independence and providing support and guidance. So you can see here there are two contrasting ideas, the giving their children independence on one hand and providing support and guidance on the other. It's quite difficult to be sort of in the middle and not be too much on one side or the other. So you have to walk that fine line as a parent. And number 9 is to cut corners. Cut corners. You may be familiar with this one, but it means to do something the easiest or maybe cheapest way, often at the expense of quality. So, when you're trying to do something, maybe create something or maintain something, but you're cutting corners, you're doing it the easiest or cheapest way, and in the end, the result is not so good, usually. So the example: it is clear that many local councils cut corners when it comes to infrastructure maintenance, resulting in poor quality road networks. And number 10, the last one, is a blessing in disguise. This is a really nice one, because it refers to something that appears to be negative at first, but actually in the end turns out to be positive. So a negative experience, a negative situation at first, but the final result is good, it's positive. So the example: being made redundant is often a blessing in disguise, as it forces the individual to try a different career which they may find more rewarding. So to be made redundant means to lose your job. Not to be fired, because if you're fired, it means you've done something wrong. But if you're made redundant, it just means the company is downsizing or restructuring. It's usually bad news at first. It's not nice to be made redundant, but sometimes the final result is positive, because the individual, the person who is made redundant, discovers a new career path which they find more rewarding. Not always, but sometimes it's a blessing in disguise. Okay, so now you have some really nice idioms that you can use in your essays and in other situations too. Don't forget, use it or lose it. Practice the vocabulary I teach in these videos. Come up with your own examples, share them in the comments, and watch this video next for more really useful advanced English vocabulary.